Right, how we doing? My name is Joshua Petty. My recitation speech is on Malcolm X. This was actually his final speech after the bombing at his house. He did a speech at the Ford Auditorium, February 14th, 1965. And it goes like this. Distinguished guests, brothers and sisters, ladies and gentlemen, friends and enemies. I want to point out first that I'm very happy to be here this evening, and I'm thankful to the Afro-American Broadcasting Company for the invitation to come here to Detroit this evening. I was in a house last night that was bombed, my own. It didn't destroy all my clothes, but you know what happens when fire dashes through. It smokes up everything. The only thing I could get my hands on before leaving is what I have on now. It isn't something that made me lose confidence in what I'm doing because my wife understands and I have children that understand, even at their young age, and they would rather have a father or a brother or whatever the situation may be who will take a stand in the face of any kind of reaction from narrow-minded people rather than to compromise and later on have to grow up in shame and disgrace. So I just ask you to excuse my appearance. I don't normally come out in front of people without a shirt and a tie. I guess that's somewhat a holdover from the Black Muslim movement, which I was in. That's one of the good aspects of that movement. It teaches you to be very careful and conscious of how you look, which is a positive contribution on their part. But that positive contribution on their part is heavily offset by too many other liabilities. Now, I hope that you'll forgive me for speaking so informally tonight, but I frankly think it's always better to be informal. As far as I'm concerned, I can speak to people better in an informal way than I can with all this stiff formality going on that ends up meaning nothing. Plus, when people are informal, they are relaxed. When they're relaxed, their mind is more open and they can weigh things more objectively. Whenever you and I are discussing our problems, we need to be very objective, very cool, very calm, and very collected. But that doesn't mean that we should always be. There's a time to be cool and there's a time to be hot. And a good example of why it is so important to look into things for yourself. I have a quick story for you. I was on a plane between Algiers and Geneva, and it just happened that two other Americans were on this same flight sitting two seats next to me. None of us knew each other, and the other two were white. One white male, one white female. And after we had been flying along for about 45 minutes, the lady says, "Can I ask you a personal question?" I said, "Yes." She said, "Well," and she looked down at my briefcase, and she says, "What kind of last name could you have that begins with an X?" So I said, "That is my last name, X." And she said, "Well, what does the M stand for?" I responded to her, "Malcolm." So she was quiet for about 5 or so minutes, and then she turned back to me and said, "No way, you're not Malcolm X." You see, we have been riding along, having nice conversations like three human beings, no hostility, no animosity, just human beings having conversation. And she couldn't take this. She said, "Well, you're not who I was looking for." I looked at her like, She goes on to say, "I was looking for horns and all of that. Someone who was out to kill white people." As if all white people could be killed. This was her general attitude, and this attitude had been given her, this image had been fed, in my opinion, by the press. So before I get involved in anything nowadays, I have to straighten out my own position, which is clear. And let me make it very clear. I am not a racist in any form whatsoever. I don't believe in any form of racism. I don't believe in any form of discrimination or segregation. What I believe in is Islam. I am a Muslim. And there's nothing wrong with being a Muslim, nothing wrong with the religion of Islam. It just teaches us to believe in Allah as the God. Those of you who are Christians probably believe in the same God, because I think you believe in the God who created the universe. Well, that's the one I believe in. It's the one who created the universe. The only difference is you guys who may be of Christian background call him God. We call him Allah. The Jews call him Jehovah. If you could understand Hebrew, you'd probably call him Jehovah as well. If you could understand Arabic, you'd probably call him Allah. But the thing with this is once you realize, that I believe in the supreme being who created the universe and believe in him as being one, it has also been taught in Islam that one God has only one religion. And we believe that religion to be Islam, And all of the prophets who came forth taught that religion. Abraham, Moses, Jesus, Muhammad, all of them. That's what we believe in. And by believing in one God and one religion of all the prophets, it creates unity. This unity is what we believe in. There's no room for argument, no need for us to be arguing with one another if we all believe in the higher power. And also in that religion, meaning the real religion of Islam, when I was in the Black Muslim movement, they didn't have the real religion of Islam in that movement. It was something else. See, the real religion of Islam doesn't teach anyone to judge another human being by the color of their skin. The yardstick that is used by the Muslim to measure another man is not by the man's color, but the man's deeds, the man's conscious behavior, the man's intentions. And when you use that as a standard of measurement, you can never go wrong. But when you just judge a man because of the color of their skin, we believe you're committing a crime. Because that's the worst kind of judgment. If you judged him because he was a Jew, that's not as bad as judging him because he's black. See, a Jew can hide his religion. He can say he's something else. And I feel like a lot of them do that. They say they're something else. But see, a black man can't hide. When you start indicting us because the color of our skin, that means we're indicted before we're even born, which is the worst kind of crime that could be committed. The Muslim religion has eliminated all tendencies to judge a man according to the color of his skin, but rather his judgment is based upon his deeds, his heart, his intentions. And when, prior to going into the Muslim world, I didn't have any, Elijah Muhammad had taught us that the white man could not enter into Mecca in Arabia, and all of us who followed him, we believed it as well. He said the reason the white man couldn't enter was because he's white and inherently evil, and it's impossible to change him. And the only thing that would change him is Islam. But he can't accept Islam because he's naturally evil. Therefore, by not being able to accept Islam and become a Muslim, he could never enter Mecca. And that's how he taught us, So I get over here, and we're in Mecca, and I saw these people who were blind and blue-eyed and pale skin and all those things, and I said, well. And I watched them closely, and I noticed that though they were white, and they would call themselves white, there was a difference between them and the white man in America, or woman, And the basic difference was this: in Asia, or Arab, or the world in Africa, where most Muslims are, if you find one who says he's white, all he's doing is using an adjective to describe something that's incidental about him. One of his incidental characteristics that he has no control of. And that's it. He's just white. But when you get to the white man over here in America, he says he's white, it plays a different role on me because, in my opinion, he means white differently. Listen to the sound of his voice. When he says he's white, I get that he means he's the boss. That's right. That's what white sounds like in the white man's language. You know the expression, free, white, and 21. Who made that up? I feel the white man is letting you know that white means free, that white means boss, that white means master. He's up there. So he has a little different sound in his voice. You guys know what I'm talking about. This is what I seen missing in the Muslim world. If they said they were white, it was incidental, of no power behind them, because they knew they didn't have that decision, but rather that's how they were born. White, black, brown, red, yellow, it doesn't make any it doesn't make any difference what color you are. So that was the religion that I had accepted, and I had gone there to get a better knowledge of it. Now, despite the fact that I saw that Islam was a religion of brotherhood, I also had to face reality. And when I got back into this American society, I realized I'm not in a society that practices brotherhood. I'm in a society that might preach it on Sunday, but they don't practice it any other day, or necessarily every single day of their lives. Not meaning perfection, but meaning living by what you preach, practicing what you preach. And so I can see that America itself is a society where there's no brotherhood, and it's a society controlled primarily by racists and segregationists, and it is. And they're in Washington, D.C. in positions of power. And from D.C., they exercise the same forms of brutal oppression against dark-skinned people in South and North Vietnam, or in the Congo, or in Cuba, and any other place on this earth where they're trying to exploit and oppress. Now, that's a shame, because we get tricked into being nonviolent. This is what I want to speak on. When somebody stands up and talks like I just did, they say, wait a minute, why is he advocating violence? Isn't that what they say? Every time you pick up your newspaper, why is he advocating violence? You see where these things are written in, but I'm not advocating violence. I have never advocated any violence. I've only said that black people who are the victims of organized violence perpetuated upon us by the Klan, the Citizens Council, and many other forms, we should defend ourselves. And when I say that we should defend ourselves against the violence of others, they use their press skillfully to make the world think that I mean be as violent as you can, point blank period. I wouldn't call on anyone to be violent without a cause. But I think the black man in this country, above and beyond people all over the world, will be more justified when he or she stands up and starts to protect themselves, no matter how many necks he has to break and heads he has to crack. I was reading the paper the other day, and I saw where, actually, I was watching it on the television, and they took this black woman down in Selma, Alabama, and knocked her right on the ground, dragging her down the street. You saw it. You're trying to pretend like you didn't see it. Why is that? Because you knew you should have done something about it, and you did nothing. You knew you should have did something about it, and you did nothing. You're trying to pretend like you didn't. Come on, y'all. It showed the sheriff and all his henchmen throwing this black woman on the ground. These men throwing this woman on the ground. If any race, period, just think. Henchmen beating and brutalizing a woman over her on the ground. Negro men standing around doing nothing about it, saying, well, let's overcome them with our capacity to love. What kind of phrase is that? Overcome them with our capacity to love? And see, this disgraces the rest of us, because all over the world, overcome them with our capacity to love. That picture is splashed, showing a black woman with white henchmen with their knees on her, beating her and holding her down, and full-grown black men standing around watching it. Why, you are lucky that they stay on earth, much less stay in this country. Brothers and sisters, hear me clearly. If you and I would just realize that once we learn to talk the language that your oppressor understands, then they start to get your point. You can't ever reach a man if you do not speak his language. If a man speaks the language of brute force, you can't come to him with peace. Why, good night. He'll break you in two pieces. And it has been going on all along. Black people are being oppressed, and we want to fulfill this capacity of love. If your oppressor meets you with brute force, they're not going to listen to you unless you meet them back with brute force. If a man speaks French, ladies and gentlemen, you can't speak to him in German. If he speaks Swahili, you cannot communicate with him in Chinese. My point, ladies and gentlemen, you have to stand up for something, or you will fall for anything.